Hello, hello, and welcome back. Welcome back to the book festival. Yes, I am Shawana Kennedy, and I am assisting the lovely LaShonda Huffman today as a part of the book fair. And then I'm going to get out of the way. As you can see, we had technical difficulties earlier, but we are back. Your authors are here. The panel is here. So grab those questions, because right before we took a short break, they were engaging and telling us a little bit about their process. So make sure if you missed that first part of this one, go back and check out part one. I know that LaShonda has some more amazing questions for our esteemed authors today. So I'm going to allow Miss LaShonda to take it away.
Thank you for coming back. I appreciate all the ladies that came back on the panel. Thank you so much. You know, technology don't be trying to make us stay great, so it happens, but that's okay. We're able to move forward. So I am going to piggyback on Miss Aziza talking about her seasonal writing. I have interviewed her a couple of times, and we've talked about the how she writes at certain times of the year. And I want to see how you all write. Are you an everyday writer? Are you write when you feel like it? Or do you have a writing schedule that you pertain to? And we'll go with EA. Are you on mute? Yeah, there you go.
I know, like they didn't want to let me speak. Let's see. So, my process when it comes to writing, I do not write every day, and I wouldn't consider myself a seasonal writer. I just don't write every day. And I think I have said this before in the debut author panel that we done, that I am autistic, ADHD. And so sometimes my brain does not work the way that everyone else's brain does. And so it's really hard for me to stay focused and concentrated sometimes. But the reason why, and so like one day can turn into 6 months if I let it without writing. So I try not to allow my shortcomings to keep me too far from my keyboard. And one way I do that is because I'm very passionate about writing. I'm very passionate about telling my stories. And I make sure I have a goal that I have set in mind. And when I'm looking at my goal, it's a daily reminder, whether it's a sticky note or I have something on my fridge right now that shows all the books that I am currently writing, and it reminds me that I need to get back to my keyboard. But I don't bully myself, and I say bully myself because sometimes we're very hard on ourselves to the point that we bully ourselves because we aren't writing and we aren't doing. So sometimes I allow myself to take that mental break, and then I get back to writing. So in a week, I make sure that I write about 4 to 5 times a week, each week.
That's good. That's good. I like that. What about you, Janet?
Uh, I do a lot of different kinds of writing. I'm very active in nonprofit organizations, so often I'm writing. For example, one group that I'm in is writing a new ethics code. So I've been writing drafts and then getting people's responses to the drafts. So that's, nonfiction writing. And but for my creative writing, a lot depends upon what I'm working on. If I'm working on nonfiction, it usually requires working on that every day. But with poetry or with fiction, I write when I get new ideas. Though it is important to write as much each week as I possibly can. I can always go back and revise, but it's important to me that I really feel some inspiration. I don't just want to be writing about the wallpaper or something like that.
That's good. What about you, Katie?
I write every day. I kind of have to write every day. Um, it's sort of the two things that I always do. I have anxiety, and one way that I deal with that is to run or walk long distances. That helps a lot for me. So I have to do that, and I have to and it's kind of the same compulsion. So it's every day. And it's kind of funny what Janet mentioned, the different kinds of writing. I was going to say, when you posed the question, I practiced law for 16 years. And I was going to say, I didn't write for 16 years. And then when I transitioned to be a full-time writer, that's when I started writing every day. But then I realized, actually, I wrote every day, even when I was practicing law, because it was largely a written practice, what I did. So, since at 25, I've been writing every single day something. But I do feel like now that I'm lucky enough, because I always wanted to be a writer, a fiction writer, even when I was practicing law. That's what I really wanted to do. Now that I'm lucky enough to be able to do it every day, it's a joy. It's like, I want to do it. I want to go to work. I want to go to my office and write. But I do have to remind myself sort of not to bully, right? But in my case, it's not to bully myself into thinking that every word I write has to be brilliant or publishable or good, or, I write every day, but a lot of it is crappy. I mean, it's never going to see the light of day. It's never going to go anywhere. And I have to accept that, right? They can't all be gems. They can't all be good. You're lucky if you get one great book that, changes the world, but most authors are not going to write a book that changes the world. So to put that kind of pressure, I try not to put that kind of pressure on myself when I'm writing. So everything that everyone said so far has kind of resonated a little bit for me.
Okay. I noticed that sometimes when I ask that question, do you write every day? And most people say no, but if you think about it, if you're doing social media, you're writing posts. If you do a blog, you're writing blogs. And sometimes I have to remind myself that I might not written on my book, but I'm constantly writing all day. And I guess that drives my head too sometimes, because I'll be like, I said, like, I've been writing all day. And then I realized I done wrote 15 posts on social media posts, and don't get into a conversation and you really
right. I mean, it's like that. It's good to say, different kinds of writing, because sometimes you don't think about it. If you're not writing something that's going to be in a book that is going to be published, you're like, oh, I didn't write today. No, that's not. That's
true.
That's not true.
Right. I had a friend send me a message and she said, "You made me cry today." And I said, "What? I did. What is you talking about?" I had posted something about grief, and she was like, "That made me cry today." And she's going, "You didn't put this stuff in a book." And I'm like, I just put stuff up there. You didn't telling it right now, And she's like, "I need you to take all that stuff about grief and put it in the book." I'm like, okay.
Sometimes that's sort of the best writing, right? Because it comes from your emotional, comes from within. It's very genuine. So
yeah, well, that's how I did my first book. It came from some questions that I posted on a blog, and my friend said, "I need you to take this blog and turn it into a book." And I was like, "That's not gonna happen. I write romance." I write nonfiction, and my first nonfiction was a romance, which was weird to me. But it was from a blog, and I wrote, and so I think that people miss that. They so busy thinking that I'm not writing. Like you said, I used to beat myself up because I didn't work on my story, but I'm like, you wrote 15 posts today. That's enough for your little brain, so that's enough. I have been writing. I'm working on a series. I'm writing a book on the Kindle platform, and it's a series. And I never heard of the term book Bible until I start doing series. So do any of you keep a book Bible for your stories?
Yeah, so I kind of sort of do. It doesn't start out that way. So actually, my next book that I'm probably going to release is called The Pantser's Companion, and it really is a way to organize for people who write first and they go back after the fact. Ooh, so usually when I write, once the initial story is done, that's when I was talking about. I highlight things that I know maybe inconsistent eye colors, heights, those sort of things. And so as I go through after my first draft, when I go through and actually do the initial full read through, that's when I'll actually create the quote unquote Bible. So I don't do it beforehand with the sheets and that kind of stuff. For me, I do it after that. And so the Bible really, my companion guide really is to help to organize plot points, character details, location details that as I'm writing, I may not necessarily think about. I can kind of keep track of them, and I can write them down, like which page number and all that I've introduced this idea or character or what have you, and then be able to flesh that out in a separate document or a book, where then I can go back and make sure that, hey, this person shows back up on page 100. Do they have the same hair color, eye color? And if not, is that intentional? Because I actually do have some characters that those things do change based off of mood. And so being able to identify that his eyes are white for this purpose, but they turn blue under these circumstances or red under another circumstance. So it can help, but for me, it's not something that I do up front because I don't outline or anything. It is something that I keep track of later on and create as a reference tool after, so that as I'm doing the third and fourth and fifth edits and reviews, I have that reference guide to go to.
I love that. I actually was in a room and they were talking about it, and I was like, that's a good idea, because by doing episodic, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going as I go. And sometimes I have to go back to rooms they were in. And I'm like, what did I say with this? I got to flip back through the things. And so I was like, oh, the book Bible sounds like a good idea. But I love that you say you do it after the fact, because that's what I end up doing. It was after I finished it. And I was like, okay, let me go back. But I do want that book. So whenever it's ready, let me know. I think that would be very helpful for me. What about you, EA?
Same. She took the words right out of my mouth. I do it after and I do it during, because I forget every 5 seconds what I wrote. And I think the book Bible is a relatively new concept when it comes to terms and labeling something. But I think that a lot of authors have been doing it for so many years prior to someone saying, oh, this is a book Bible, because just memory alone, I can't remember. I'm writing before a 4-series book, and I can't remember what they did in book 1 on page 22 at this tavern. So I need that book Bible to, dates, places, themes, ideas, even quotes are in there that are relative to each character that I have. Their favorite foods that they love to eat, their little quirks that they have. So all that stuff is in the book Bible. And now I'm seeing a lot of people, especially indie authors, that are coming out with their book Bible. So if you buy directly from an indie author, a lot of them are also wrapping up these little cute little book Bibles to send with the books that have all those things listed out. So I thought that was a really cool idea, because we do it anyway.
Well, I never heard of that. I tried to do in an actual notebook, and every time I needed it, it was at home. So I've been doing my digital. I use Evernote. I love Evernote. That's oh my God, it has saved my life so many times. And so I just created a book Bible folder, and I put all my information in there, and it's with me at all times, so I don't have to worry about it. But I have not seen anyone send out a book Bible. So that's interesting. I talk about Beverly Jenkins a lot, so you probably hear me say something about her again, but her readers are like the book Bibles. They be knowing everything about her books, and she'd be like, I don't remember who had who and what kid was that. And there were people that read the book so many times that they can tell you, on page 44, you did so and so. Do you know why you did that? And she'd be like, what? I wrote that book 20 years ago. Are you serious? And I'm like, that's what you want. You want that fan who is deep into the book Bibles. So that's fun.
Yes.
Jen, and what about you? Do you keep a book Bible?
Well, I do make, if I'm writing something long, I do make an outline to make sure that I cover everything that I want to cover and that I cover it in a logical order. When I wrote my doctoral dissertation, I had a very detailed outline, and it was very helpful so that I didn't repeat myself, and so that I ordered the chapters in my doctoral dissertation, which wound up getting published as a work of nonfiction. It was very helpful in structuring my book to have a detailed outline. And then I arranged all my notes in the order that they should be in the outline, and I wrote the draft. So that did make the process a lot easier. I had a very detailed outline. And I do I know Katie Richards mentioned that she outlines carefully too. And I think that is important to do, especially if it's something long. But if I'm writing a haiku or something like that, I don't really, I'll just write a bunch of different versions, and then I'll decide later which of the versions is most effective. And even though haiku is very short, it's a very short poem, 17 syllables or fewer. And these days, most are much shorter, because the theory is that English doesn't need as many syllables as Japanese does to write a poem. So I'm often revising to cut any word I possibly can.
Okay. What about you, Katie?
Yeah, I read a series, so you have to even though each book can be read as a standalone, the characters from prior books show up in the more recent books. So they will let you know if you said somebody's hair was short and then it was long, or it was gray and now it's brown again, and you got to explain those changes. Your readers notice that kind of thing. So I do keep I guess a book Bible. It's just written notes on each of the characters and what they did and what their sort of emotional wound was, or what their problem was in the particular book, just so I can be consistent. You know, if I said that they were, traumatized from going to war, I don't want for them to not be traumatized with it, or them to be, a comedic character somewhere down the line. So yeah, definitely do.
Okay, that's good to know. My question is about writing goals. Do you all set writing goals for the year? Aziza said no.
I do as I'm told, and like this year, I didn't get a whole lot of writing done, and I'm okay with that. That was again something that I had learned about my process, is that there are going to be some years where I don't do anything related to a novel or a short story or anything like that. Though I'm still trying to force myself to do it, because there's a submission that I want to do at the end of the year. But I very much have let go of the chokehold that I may have had in my earlier years. But part of that too is that writing is therapeutic to me, and a lot of things that my characters go through, I can clearly see is my way of processing a trauma or processing something that I've gone through. It may not necessarily be trauma. It might be a happy memory, or, something that I needed to be reminded of. So my writing process together is a therapy. I have a course that's called Sanity Through Fantasy, and that's what it's about, using fantasy and understanding that writing is a form of therapy, and that it can be done in the creative realm. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in journaling or in a nonfiction approach. So I don't necessarily have goals, but if my characters compel me to make sure something's done by the end of the year, then they are going to make sure it's done whether I like it or not.
I love that your characters tell you what to do. Mine do that sometimes too. I'll be like, I want to sleep. not talk to you today. So
I've got one arrogant, obnoxious, self-centered, egotistical, pompous SOB of a vampire who pretty much, if it gets to be too much and they can clearly see that I can't even function in the real world, I'm like, hey, people, I still have to pay bills. And I'm like, Auric, I'm gonna need you to kind of calm them down, regulate, put them in order, and whoever y'all decide is the voice to be heard this time, so be it. But I still need to make sure that we all have a roof over our heads.
Yes, they'll listen sometimes. What about you, EA? She's still talking. Put yourself on mute. There you go.
Me as a mute is gonna fight it out.
Look, I had to
Me
just
as
leave
mute
it
is gonna
alone.
fight it out.
Just leave it alone. You'll be all right.
I do. I have writing goals. I have a ton. I want to make sure that I'm always updating my blogs on my website. Next year, I want to focus on strengthening my writing and storytelling in various different genres. So I set a goal for myself that each month I was going to write a short story, rather it is a flash, meaning 100 words, all the way up to, I will give myself about 10,000 range, because I can write a 10,000 short story in a weekend. So each month, I want to work on writing one short for a theme to strengthen my writing. So next year is Monster in the House. And so that means that I will be writing any story related to monster, horror, or anything Monster in the House related. And each month, that's that goal. On top of that, my goal next year is to release supersized bubblegum about the 4 fat ladies who get magical powers by eating bubblegum. I can't wait to release that one. And also finish up the second book to When Blood Meets Earth, which is back here, my little finger. And the second book is When Fire Meets Fire. So I'm writing that now. So I have a lot of lofty goals next year.
Those are great goals. I think I might even take you up on the short story stuff, because I haven't wrote any short stories, but I need some freebies and I have none. And so that's one I might add to my goals. So thank you for that. Miss Janet, what about you?
Well, I have a lot of manuscript of books for children, and one of my goals is to try to get another one of those published. I've published 2 books for children so far, but I've written about 10 more. So I really want to try to find publishers for those. And there are other manuscripts that I have, nonfiction, drama, poetry, that I need to revise and get published. So I recently succeeded in September in publishing an essay I'd been trying to publish for 6 years. So you have to be patient. And recently a poem of mine got accepted for publication that I originally wrote in 1978. So you have to be patient. So, the poem didn't need revision, but it just needed the right editor to like it. Okay. So one of my goals is just keep sending out stuff and not giving up.
Wow, that's a great goal. That's a great goal. What about you, Katie?
Yeah. I mean, I always have goals. I'm under contract to write the series, so I got to do that according to the contract. But then there are other projects that are sort of my own free form projects that I come up with that aren't already sold. So I finished a thriller. I would like to get that, get a publisher for that this year. I have an idea for a fantasy novel that I wrote the first 1,000 words on just yesterday. So hopefully get that done this year. And that one has been that one has been in my head for like the last 10 years, and I finally figured out what the plot is. So I'm real excited about that one. So that's a real goal for this year, is to now that I know what's going to happen, to get it on paper, because it's been with me for quite a long time. So, but yeah.
Okay. So my next question is about challenges. Can you share some challenges you've encountered on your writing journey, and how you've overcome them?
So I'm guessing we're going in order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, I guess the greatest challenge was really fighting with myself, and that's what kind of came about with the accepting that I'm going to write in seasons. So there were a lot of times where I was trying to force myself to write, and it just really wasn't the time. And ironically, I had a publisher that wanted me to finish something in a certain period of time, and I kept, telling this person, I'm telling you now, you're going to see the difference. And I finally had to show them. I finished what they asked me to finish, but you could clearly see the difference between what I wrote and when my characters write. And it took that, full example for others to kind of understand that, for people who are empaths who channel their characters, you will get an entirely different voice. You'll get a entirely different sentence structure, all of these bits and pieces of a story that a lot of times people don't think about. That's just kind of shows up as, this is who this writer or this is who this author is. Those things can be changed if their writing process is disrupted, or it is being forced in a direction that may not be natural for that person. And so I did that for a long time, and I finally stopped, and I finally started paying attention to when the writing flowed best for me. And then I started to design my writing and my authorship around that. So it's not to say that during the early part of the year that I may not write at all. It's not to say that I may not that my characters don't talk to me at that time. If they do, then I acknowledge it and I do whatever they need me to do. But I structure my actual writing now around the later part of the year, and then I spend the early part of the year doing more of the author stuff. So the promotions, the setting up things for the full year, so that when writing time comes along, I don't have to think about the business stuff as much. I really can just focus on the writing.
Yeah, I think this is the same. I think one of the biggest challenges for me is being a team of one.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I work a full-time job. I feel like I'm in a perpetual state of exhaustion 24/7, on top of getting writing, marketing, being active with other authors, the readers, getting packages together, the finding your audience. Just being a team of one as an indie author has been the hardest challenge for me, on top of people who are telling you, oh, you're not really an author, or your books won't sell because they look this way, or feeling that peer pressure to change the ethnicity of my characters because they want me to write to an audience that, a certain type of audience. And it's been challenging to keep my voice without allowing the world to tell me who I am, but telling them who I am and what I write, and this is what I stand for. And if you don't want to buy a fantasy book about a dragon shifting princess, then don't do it. And if you don't want to buy a book about 4 or 5 women eating bubblegum and having superpowers, don't do it. So and another challenge on that note is like writing to market, writing what sells. People say, oh man, you're such a great writer, your books are so good. If you start writing this, and this, then you are sell this, and this, and this. I'm not a romance writer. I know a lot of people are romance. I'm not like the biggest romance writer. Do I do romance? Yes, but that's not my full concentration, my full focus. Romance will always be a B plot in my A story. Always. It will never be the main focus. And so it's just saying, being true to myself, keeping my voice, keeping my standards of what I like, and finding a community and a team that's willing to be like, you know what? Let me take that off your plate. And working with other people and doing things like this so I can put myself out there. So those have been my challenges.
That's all new authors challenges, and you learn as you grow, and I love that you want to stay true to yourself. When I started this business, I worked with romance authors, and half of them didn't want to be romance authors. They did it because that was the market. And the problem with going with the market is sometimes you get stuck in that market. And so you can't branch out to do other things. You want to write fantasy, but no, I need you to write romance. I knew a lot of them that wanted to go into paranormal, but their readership wouldn't come with them. And so they had to sacrifice their readership to move to something else. And so I always tell people, write what you want to write, because if they love it, they're going to want more. And if that's not something you want to do, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to always end up starting over versus building your readership. So if that's what you want, you write what you want, not what's hot. Because if what's hot is not what you like to do, you're going to resent it eventually. And then you see a lot of authors that drop off because they're not doing what they wanted to do. What about you?
Or they have a billion pen names. I'm not doing that either. I'm sorry. I'm not. I respect those that have it and they do it and they manage it. I'm not doing it. My name is E.A. Noble. So you're going to have E.A. Noble in supernatural, paranormal, horror, romance.
That gets hard when you're doing children, though. When you're doing children's books and that kind of stuff, you can't be handed it. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you ever decide to go to children's route, you're going to have to do something.
In children's books. I don't.
You say that now. I said that 20 years ago, and here I am 25 years later working on the children's book.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
I'm not going to say never, but as of right now, anything that is 18 years below is not my jam in this season of my life. So that's a no for me.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I write nonfiction and I write romance. And so I don't have 2 separate pen names, but it's just LaShonda Hoffman. But oh my God, it's a lot of work. So when people tell me that, I'm like, I don't want a new name. I got two genres that I write in, and that drives me crazy. So, go ahead, Janet.
Okay. I wanted to talk about several different challenges that I've had as a writer. When I started writing books for children, I didn't realize how important reading level is, because a lot of what I write is picture books. So my first draft of what wound up being How the Moon Regained Her Shape, my award-winning book about bullying, my first draft was at a 5th grade reading level, which is too high for a picture book. Mm-hmm. So I worked with the publisher to lower the reading level to a 2nd grade reading level. And I'm a former college professor, so I was used to dealing with young adults and adults in my classes. So I didn't have to worry about my sentences being too long for my students, or using 3 or 4 syllable words, but you do have to worry about that if you're trying to write at a 2nd grade reading level. So I had to shorten my sentences. I had to use slightly simpler words to keep it at a 2nd grade reading level. So that was one challenge I had. Then with poetry, one challenge is unifying the book. I have one book that's all nature poems. And then I wound up deciding to organize it by the seasons of the year. So there are a bunch of poems about winter, a bunch of poems about summer, so I organized it by the seasons of the year. Also, the order of arrangement of the poems. How do you begin? Which poem really makes sense to begin the book? Which poem really makes sense to end the book of poems? And within the sections of the book, which poems should go in what order? So those are some of the challenges I've had with writing poetry. Then with nonfiction, there are often length requirements. The essay that I got published recently, each journal has different length requirements for the essays that it will publish. So you really have to follow that. So sometimes I have to cut sentences or cut paragraphs or even cut pages to comply with the length requirements of different publishers. Then for drama is all dialogue. So you don't really get to comment about the character the way you can in a poem or short story or a novel. You have to use what people say to convey who they are and what their goals are and what their personality is. So that's been a real challenge when I write plays, to just get that all in dialogue.
Yeah, those were.
So I think for me, the biggest challenge is me, that my own voice in my head that's criticizing, generally at the wrong time, at the worst time. Always, is this good enough? You should do it better. It's not, the story is not great. It's too much like whatever book, everybody's going to think it's some other book, and it's just, a riff off of that or a play off of that. All the, any writer is used to hearing that voice in their head. So that for me is the hardest part to deal with, to put that all aside and to do the work, to write and not get caught up in spending all my writing time, tearing myself down, or tearing my writing down. And can be really hard, really, really hard to do. Yeah.
The mindset, I learned a lot about the mindset as a unpublished author, in my head all the time, thinking nobody's going to read my stuff. Nobody wants my stuff. And that is really so hard. I still deal with that. Even though I'm published now, I still deal with it. And what I've learned is that everybody does. So you're normal.
Well, I think maybe I kind of had a different experience coming into publishing, because I wrote the first book in my series after I moved to Canada, and I was in a period where I couldn't legally work because I had because I didn't have my green card. And so I was like, I'm going to write this book that I've always been wanting to write, and with no real intention at the beginning of ever publishing it. It wasn't the first manuscript I had written. So I was like, I was going to be like all the other manuscripts. I write it and then it goes in a drawer, never to be seen again. But when I got to the end, I was like, this is kind of good. Like, it seems like I've made some progress in my writing. And like, it's not, at the very least, I would not be embarrassed to send it to a publisher and see if it gets picked up. I don't expect it to be, but I don't think they're going to like laugh when they read it. So that's how I ended up sending it, with no expectations whatsoever. And the publisher liked it. But then the second book, now it's like, oh, okay, there's expectations. And so that's when and that made it in some sense even worse, because I was like, this is never going to be as good as the first one. And so it just keeps like going and going and going, right? It's like, you really, the voice tells me like, oh, you need it was better when you didn't have any expectations. Now you have expectations and you can't you can't meet them. So I don't know.
Oh.
The voice always finds a way.
I'm listening
LaShonda
to you
knows
say-
for me a
Go
big
ahead.
thing. LaShonda knows for me that that's a big thing. We always kind of come back to the whole. When she ever asked me, you know, what is my advice for writers, and for me, it's always, you know, what's your motivation for writing. So for me, being a writer and being an author are mutually exclusive. I will always be a writer. I may not always be an author. And so your approach to your writing process, your approach to marketing, your approach to promotion, your approach to getting out there can all be determined based on what your motivation is. For you, you'll have people who spit out books every other week. Most of them are in it to make the money. They're not in it to for a long term. You know, some of them eventually may end up being that way, but their initial motivation is to make as much money as possible. And right now we're in that keep their readers' attention. You almost have to do stuff back to back to back to back. And so their motivation for writing is tailored to get as many books as I can written and get them out. For some people who, you know, really want to write a quote unquote in their mind profound type book, you know, you look at these authors. My first book, while I wrote it in that amount of time, in that 30 days, I didn't release it for 4 or 5 years. I have books. The book I released a couple of years ago, it took me 7 years to write, and I'm okay with that. But I also know that my approach to my writing process really is about listening to my characters, being authentic to myself and my characters. And so that's going to dictate my approach to everything else. So kind of what is your motivation for writing? And then what is your motivation for being an author are the two things that you kind of have to know that, you know, if you go out and you get a contract, you know, you won't have to be motivated to fulfill those requirements. When I got my first contract, I got suckered into publishing. I didn't necessarily want to be in publishing, but I already had 3 books written. So when they came back and offered 2 books with third option, I was like, well, I have stuff already. You know, if I want to write something else, I can. But if I don't have that opportunity, I have some stuff on my shelf that I can pull a hand over. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't, I'm good.
Yeah, I think the motivation and the knowing your why is so important. Aziza taught me that. It helped me a lot because sometimes you do get stuck in your head and you have to go back to, why are you doing this again? Why you want to do this? I just had that conversation with my editor because I was like, I'm stuck. I don't want, you know, it's not going the way I thought it was going to go. And she was saying the same thing. It's not going the way I want. I said, but we weren't about making that big money yet. We knew we got to work up to the big money. You just ain't gonna come out with the big money. And so we went back and said, she sent me a message going, I'm writing. I'm like, yes, I love that. I love to hear that you're writing again. So that why really helps a lot. And it looks like we are at our end, ladies. And this was really good. I hope this was helpful for other writers who are trying to jump into this business because it can be crazy. It's I call it a roller coaster ride. Sometimes you have some good highs and sometimes you have some really, really lows. You know, you're just going up and down, but it's the best ride you'll ever be on if you decide to join the writing hood. So thank you so much for being here. Can you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you on social media?
Everywhere under Aziza Sphinx. And if you're not into paranormal, fantasy, science fiction, I do write all my other genres under Energy Write. So even if you start at Aziza Sphinx, Google me. However, it'll lead you also over to the Energy Write stuff.
Yeah, same. I am EA Noble, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all EA Noble or author EA Noble. It's not really that hard to find me. If you Google it, I'm gonna pop up. It's not that hard. So yeah.
My website is janetruthheller.com. I'm also active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and X. And Amazon Author Central has a page with my books also.
And my website is kdrichardsbooks.com. And I am on Facebook, Threads, and Instagram as KD Richards Author. So Pretty simple.
All right. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here at the book festival. I appreciate your time. I know we had a little hiccups, but I'm so glad you came back. So thank you. I appreciate that. We will be back for another panel later on about publishing. We're going to be talking all about publishing. We have two ladies that are going to come and talk to us about that. So come back later, and hopefully you're enjoying the book festival. I'm having fun. I'm reading all these posts and trying to make comments and still be the host. So thank you for spending time with us today. Have a great one.